fingers. Probably don't like it. Jim won't be here because he's in Florida. I know that. Today's update is his feet, but beer can't be looking at a little butter. He was on a dock, not a beach. It was not.
All right, good evening. December 15th Fincom meeting. Tonight's a special meeting, a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen we have here and School Committee. Thank you very much for everyone for joining. And the agenda is to talk about the 2017 budget, recap of our all-day meetings last month, and summarized now by our very proficient Assistant Town Administrator, as well as capital plans and the headcount requests and so on that goes along with that. I think we're going to start, however, with the school committee update, because we didn't get that at the November meeting.
Yep, that's fine. Hold on.
Okay.
Documentation has arrived.
In a suit. Oh, look at this. All right. Why don't you just give us the whole pile, Mike? We'll hand them out.
Bonnie's going to pull up a, I'm going to keep one on my device.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, there we go, thank you.
Where's the,
That's way more than you need. Yeah. Yeah, go that way.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Some more for audience participation there.
I'll probably pull you up easier too, I guess.
All right, so since the budget summit in November, we've done some more work on our numbers and stuff, and we've made some adjustments. The overall number, which was an increase of $1.2 million, hasn't really changed, but some of the buckets that we looked at in November have moved. For instance, salary increases, we originally had at about $558,000, and we bumped that up to $668,000. We had some lane changes that we hadn't tracked that have changed. We might even have a couple more of those. And we had a couple of some salary numbers that were being funded by school choice. We want to adjust that number into the appropriation to get a better handle on that. So that went up a little bit. Case transportation, we originally had at $25,000 as an estimate. That's a pretty firm $37,000 right now. The SPED consulting we left the same, still a little bit of an estimate, but we think that's about right. The SPED out of district we originally had at $250,000. It's still an estimate, but we've done some research. We don't think it's going to go as high as an increase of $250,000. We think that was pretty conservative, so we moved that down to $150,000. We still have the additional staff at Russell Street and the other buildings that we're looking at. Materials and resources, that hasn't changed. We did adjust the substitute line down from a $100,000 increase to $75,000, and professional development stays at $20,000. So the overall number was 1.248 a month ago. It's now 1.245. And if we look at the next slide, the one thing we do want to talk about tonight, after looking at the material that Bonnie put forth, was that she has in the documents that she's going to go over the level service budget, and for us, she has a $690,000. We really feel that level service doesn't really serve us very well because there's not as high a correlation as there is with other town departments between staffing and servicing. So to say level staffing for the other departments and funding that you're going to effectively get what you got last year for that increased amount of money. Because of our SPED expenses and the other things, because we're just a larger entity, we really like to think about level services, and that $1.2 million is what we project for a level services. That is not a mission budget. The mission budget would be larger. There are plenty of things we would like to do if we had the opportunity to do it. I'm not thinking about a blank check necessarily, but there are things we would do, and it would go up past $1.2 million to reach what I think the other departments were framing as their mission budget. So we just look at the next slide. The way we're trying to think about it is,
Excuse me,
Yeah.
before you go off this slide, you mentioned that within the 668,
yep,
quote, some of that was paid out of choice, and you're moving it into this line?
right.
If that's the case, what's happening to the money you're saving out of choice?
Well, let's talk about that when we
Yeah,
get
just-
towards the end. It's a great question,
Okay.
and I don't know that we're going to answer that tonight, but we can definitely start to frame that discussion, and we'll see where we're going to
Okay.
go. Okay. But, for instance, the increases to meet our service levels that we're currently providing, obviously, we need the salaries. We need to keep, if we're going to keep that amount of staff to service the number of children that we have, we need to increase those salaries. We need to provide case transportation. We have to increase that number. Professional development we need to do in order to provide the service level that we have. You look at the next slide, we're projecting some student growth, and we need to increase our capacity. If we don't, by definition, our service level is going to go down. So that additional staffing that we're looking for, the materials and resources that we talked about, that's not a mission budget type of thing that, will make us do more. It's what we need to currently meet that service level that we're currently providing from this year to next. And then lastly, these things are, again, these are the estimates, so I can't say for sure that these are exact numbers we need to, but, we are going to have to pay our SPED consultants, staff, and our out-of-district costs. What those numbers actually turn out to be, again, we have to provide those services, or increase that amount of money to provide that same level of service that we're providing, unless we, need to provide more SPED services. If we don't increase the SPED number, when we rob Peter to pay Paul, our service level is going down somewhere else. So we just wanted to kind of frame it like that and make sure that the documentation that we're all reviewing tonight, we're all kind of thinking in the same way, because we're definitely not thinking level staffing, we're thinking level services. And those numbers that we put out there, we feel are what we're talking about for level services. And then the last slide is looking at...
I have a question
Yes.
before you go beyond that. Going back to the slide with the adjusted budget analysis with materials and resources for $100,000, give me an idea what that is.
So we talked about that in November on that Saturday meeting.
Refresh my memory.
That is for materials for curriculum, primarily we have a new curriculum, science curriculum at the middle school, and then we also have some new curriculums at the elementary level.
You say new science?
A new science curriculum, so it's a different program, it's a different company, it's a different curriculum program. Every few years, we evaluate a particular subject area and make a determination about, is our current curriculum material meeting the requirements for all the things that we think about, MCAS, college preparation, SAT, AP, however you want to look at it, and think about our Common Core standards, all those types of things. When we evaluate that, quite often we feel like we need to upgrade our materials. Sometimes those materials are outdated and just not. And the other thing to keep in mind is that the way of providing those types of materials is changing. It's evolving. It used to be textbooks. Textbooks, answer books, guidebooks for the teachers, that was what we were talking about. It's not really what we're talking about now. Talking about online materials, resources, things like that. So that $100,000 is to meet those new curriculum materials that we want to put in place for the students. Again, at the middle school primarily and elementary school.
It's fair to say we got to be prepared for some of these people start moving towards subscription models for the materials versus outright purchase also, which we're seeing that everywhere because for the people wanting the ongoing revenue streams versus the one-time purchase revenue streams.
Just from a historian's standpoint, historically, when a new program would come up, we'd see basically a capital request in the budget process for new books for science or new books for something else, and this is that equivalent.
Exactly.
So it's not that unusual, it just shows up here rather than as a line item.
Right, we've kind of gone back and forth to trying to figure out what's the best way to fund those things. And sometimes it depends in a given year on
Right.
where is the money, is it more accessible in capital than it is in operating?
Right.
But to Darrell's point, you could make an easy, fairly, I think, standard argument that textbooks by definition are capital. They degrade and they become obsolete at some
They
point.
last for 5 years.
But a
whatever it
subscription
is.
is not necessarily,
You get a pay,
you wouldn't
right.
think of that necessarily as capital, that's more like an expense.
It's like
that
software
occurs.
licensing fees,
Exactly.
they gig you every year
Right,
for the license
right,
fee, right?
Right.
On the same slide, the additional staff in Russell Street,
Yeah.
what is that? Is that a...
Yeah, we talked about that also in November. That is, our class sizes are growing. And we cut back in that building a few years ago,
Okay.
and it's catching up to us. We cut back in that building when we had to make some cuts because we felt like we could sustain the service level and the class sizes would be tolerable. It's inching back upward to a level where we're not comfortable. We're thinking it'd be going to be more like 24 to 26 students if we don't bring another head count in that building.
Okay.
And then the...
So it's a classroom teacher?
Yeah, that's a teacher, yes. That specific one is a teacher at that
And
building.
the additional staff, other buildings?
Is, again, we're trying to figure out, we would add a staff. We're not sure if we would address the high school or Shaker Lane, but it'll be one or
So it's
the
about
other.
a one head count equivalent?
Exactly.
But it's a teacher, though.
It's a teacher. It's not resource, it's not
Teacher,
materials,
okay,
it's,
okay.
it's staff.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. And then, kind of, Fred, that circle towards where I think where you were going. So we're estimating school choice, 628,000. We're using 400,000 this year. We expect to get about $385,000 in. That'll push us back towards 628,000. And then circuit breaker, we're expecting to get reimbursed to the tune of 893,000. What we want to do with it and how much we want to spend. I mean, circuit breaker, we know what we're going to do. We're going to spend it. You know, we've all made a determination that we're going to spend that year by year.
Right.
School choice, is $400,000 again the right number? Is it less? Is it more?
Right.
Some of that's going to depend on what we can do in terms of the appropriation and in terms of what we feel we need to spend. And I don't necessarily think we have an answer for that tonight. I think that's part of the process that's going to unfold over the next couple of months as we drive towards town meeting. But that's where we are with those two particular
And
accounts.
the increase in sped is expected incremental kids, or
No, well, no,
is it just cost? Not on this slide,
Oh.
but back on the other slide, the sped was going up.
It's not necessarily new kids, it's increases in the
rates
assessment
that
by the
they're paying.
providers.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the 1.2 million is the total expense, or does that also already have some of these other funding mechanisms built into this?
No, that's just the raw.
This is the number.
We expect
So not the
our
appropriation
spending to
number.
go up $1.2 million. The question is, how do we get
And
there?
we pay for it, right?
Right, how do we get there? And again, I just want to stress one more time, that to us is a level service number. You know, we can argue on the margins and make determinations about, you know, exactly what that means, but the gist of it is that that is level serviced. That is not making us bigger, stronger, or faster.
And the substitutes going up to another 75,000?
Yeah, so-
People not showing up for work,
No,
or they're out for
well,
training?
it's not even
or
that so
what
much
that?
is, it's a couple of things. We've become more reliant on substitutes the last few years because of the way we do professional development and other things. And we have had some long-term substitution requirements because staff has left for health reasons or pregnancies or whatever it is. But the real issue for this and why we're putting this in the budget this year is that we used to put that into the operating budget as a number.
Right.
We always used more than we budgeted, and we always met that overage. We never knew exactly how much it was going to be, we just had the flexibility to deal with it out of choice. Now we feel like we don't have that flexibility as much as we used to, where we're more vulnerable because we're becoming more reliant on choice to pay for other operational items. We feel, from a fiduciary perspective, we'd be more responsible to get that number reflected more on an actualized basis in the operating budget. So it's not really an increase of how much we're using 2016 to 2017. How much we've been using has been inching up over several years, but it's how we're accounting for it and paying for it and budgeting for it.
Okay, so you're looking forward in the operating budget, which again, potentially would free up some choice money. I mean, that's what I'm hearing. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'd be careful about how you thought about that.
Well, okay.
You know, if we use that choice money for that, then we're not going to be able to use it for something else.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
or be able to manage a unforeseen circumstance.
Okay.
Other questions?
Not so much questions, although I would be interested to get Bonnie's input too here, because one of my first comments is that I think it's important to underscore again what a different place we are at in terms of information sharing, cooperation, just on the procedural level than, a few years ago, and that was a process we were working through from when PJ was chair, your chair, and certainly all the time that Kelly's been superintendent. And I applaud the format. I'd like to hear Bonnie's perspective at some point about how well she perceives the integration of data is between the two departments. As to the specifics in the budget, I'm finding it highly reasonable, and thank you on that. And I guess, that's, obviously we don't see here the line item, but then again, that could be kind of misleading, because at the end of the day, by state law, you can or you can't, we would probably appreciate, for just edification purposes, seeing line item budgets sooner than later, but that's not what the town meeting votes, and that's not what you're obligated to follow, so it's more informational than anything.
And we do have a more detailed presentation that Bonnie has given us a model for. What I will say to that is, we've looked at that. We do want to make some modifications to it, nothing dramatic, but before we start pumping numbers into it, we'd like to make the modifications, show them, get consensus that still meets the requirement that you guys have for providing the information, and then we'll start putting numbers in. And with the caveat that we've never done it that way before, so the first time around, we're going to have to look here and pull there and dice
So
out.
that's a dialogue you guys need to have.
Yeah, exactly. And then obviously, I think it'll get easier as we go. That is on our list of things to do in the near term, and we're working towards that. But we'll have some back and forth on the format.
Yeah, that format comes directly from our software system. So, I mean, if it needs to be changed, I just need to make sure that the report export.
All I think is just a way of how we're representing the revolving funds and how we want to show where that money is coming from and where it's going versus the appropriation and stuff like that. So.
Yep.
So this will show a year-to-year comparison on those line items. So what is the time frame for that?
I know that they've been working on it for the last probably week or so.
We'll have the modifications before the end of this week, and then hopefully we can get, turn that around
So
fairly
January, we're
quickly.
looking at January.
Yeah, and then we'll start actually putting the numbers in there
Okay.
and go from there.
Very good.
And I agree. I think once we get the template down, it'll just,
Yeah, that's it.
that'll be it. It'll
Okay.
be-
And I think it's
But even
worthwhile-
prior to that, thank you. I mean,
Yeah.
we're in a much better place than we've been in.
And I think it's worthwhile to get the template down one time so that we don't have to tweak it
Right.
dramatically, and hopefully it'll sustain itself as a valuable tool for some period of time. Something like that.
Very good. All right, thank you.
Budget?
Budget.
All right.
Do you see this, PJ?
What's that?
Just a sidebar comment. He gave me a shot away, and I had to give him a shot.
All right, I'm gonna.
Okay, so this is the summary, basically, of the 2017 department budget requests for both the level staffing and the mission budgets. Basically, I want to give you a little bit of overview of what we're looking at for 2017 for available resources before we get into the detail. But based on the current estimates for revenue and other available funds, the operating budget could support an increase of $1.8 million, or 4.2%, over the 2016 levels. What's in that assumption is the full use of the 2.5 levy limit increase that's allowed, and the new growth, which is currently estimated at 1.1 million. This is a historical high for new growth. It is based on what's in the pipeline right now for projects, which would include the Sand Park development, 15 Great Road, a lot of housing developments along Sanderson Road and the other areas in town. There are a lot of projects in the pipeline. This is the highest I've ever seen new growth since I've been here for 10 years, so I wouldn't expect this to be a sustainable type of issue.
Stay on the slide for a moment.
Yes.
This red light to ask that we consider going forward for this fiscal year, 17, based on Bonnie just saying, historical high she's ever seen, and we see the out years, the growth, it falls precipitously from this level here, is that we at least consider not going to the full levy. And I mean not collecting to the full levy. No, it's not taxing to the full levy. Not just collecting to it and then not spending perhaps, or redistributing in other areas. At least we begin the dialogue, with this little bit of background, so as we go through the rest of our planning process, that's in our minds, and we can begin to at least put brain bites against it. And if at some point we reject it because it's not the right thing to do, that's fine. But I'd rather reject it and have asked the question and then said no, versus not have asked the question at all. So I ask that we keep that in our minds going forward, please. I don't know the right number. I think we could, sharpen pencils and do some math and see, what this new growth is, balance it against future projections of new growth, and then make some determinations and come up with a number that I think could arrive at some consensus if we want to go down that road.
can I?
Yeah, sure.
While I applaud that, and I couldn't, I'm never going to be one to oppose that kind of thinking, I think it's important for folks, as we discuss that, to keep in mind what is really meant by what Bonnie just said in terms of that being a historical high and the out years going down. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure once this money comes in, it's always there. It's part of the new base.
The gift
It's the
that
rate
keeps
of
on
growth that is going to taper off. So I'm not using that as an argument against what you're saying. I'm just saying in that context, we have two things going on here. It's not like the money we're getting here is not going to be there next year. We're just not going to get as much next year.
It's not a one-time deal, you're absolutely right.
Right.
And it gets the philosophy, because it's there, we don't necessarily need to spend it.
That, I'm with you on that.
Absolutely right, and I think that's part of the discussion that we should have, because if we really do see new growth tailing off, then what you end up with is, the schools and our staff cost us close to $800,000 a year just for COLA and steps and lanes. And that doesn't go away unless you start cutting heads, which you don't want to get into. So do we put some money away?
By not spending it in the first place.
Right, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, but I'm even suggesting, never mind not spend it, not collect it.
Right, but that's a
No,
capacity that we
something
could pick
less
up
than
later.
Yeah.
Once you lose that capacity, you don't get it back unless you overrun. So you
No,
want to be
no,
careful
no,
on
It's
that.
unused levy capacity,
Yeah.
it remains in what you could tax in future
Right.
years.
Okay,
I'm
okay.
not
So it's kind of,
suggesting
it's a bit insurance, could be an insurance policy if we approach it that way.
I had $1 million in unused levy capacity for 10 years in Provincetown, and then
Must have been
our
fun,
luck just ran out after, so.
But you could also hit your townspeople with a big increase at some point down the road, depending on how the, future boards vote. So I agree with all that, and I'm glad you brought it up, Paul, and I think we should always be looking at that, of like, what can we not spend? I think the other part of that, the other side of that argument could be, though, we've done level staffing for a long time, and the town is growing a lot. So we also have to be realistic about, this growth didn't come from nowhere, it came from new stores and new houses, and that also requires some additional services probably as well. So we've got to have the whole discussion. So that's why we're here. That's why we get the big bucks, right? Okay.
And you get the bonus as the chairwoman.
What's that?
And you get the bonus as the chair.
That's right, there we go, absolutely. All right, great. Yeah, we were discussing earlier how, in some respects, it's almost going to be harder, this may be a tough, in a nicer way, but a more difficult decisions almost we make. If you have to say no across the board, it's almost easier than now we have choices to make, right? It's a good place to be, but...
So the level staffing budget, and again, I would qualify that with level staffing with the comments made by the school department, but based on the numbers that I'm holding in there for level staffing requests, that would require an increase of 1.6, almost 1.7 million, which is less than the amount that we have technically available for 2016, and it's about a 3.8% increase over the 2016.
And what number is in there for the schools?
690,000.
Okay, so basically half, or a little more than half of what they're looking for.
Correct.
Okay.
The mission budget requests, or the total of all of the other requests, would require an increase of 3.464 million over 2016, or a total of 7.85% in an increase, and is not sustainable as such. Would create a deficit of about $1.5 million. So this is what the level staffing summary budget looks like. In the town operating budgets, again, level staffing, just existing staff, steps and COLAs that might be due. For the operating budgets in the town departments, this doesn't include debt service or anything like that. This is just the town operating departments. The increase required would be $277,000 or 3.57%. The school appropriation, this is the $690,000 that I had referenced. I had just budgeted initially a 4% increase because I wasn't sure where that was going to come through. So I know that will need to be reviewed. School reserve spending in fiscal 2016, there was $1,072,000 that was spent. I plugged in approximately the same number for next year. And that would be the circuit breaker and school choice funds used. And I'll speak to that a little bit after. Technical school assessment, I have budgeted $650,000. I know it seems like a large increase at 31%. That would equate to about 10 students, a 10-student increase. So it's not really unreasonable, and it is a 5-year average of what the technical school assessment has been. I think the 5-year average was 645 and change. So keeping it in there at this point is probably reasonable until it gets...
Do we have some indication, I mean, 10 students out of a class of 100, which is usually, you'd probably, I mean, that's,
Yeah.
10%.
okay.
I don't remember the exact numbers, but this year, you
It's
guys
the
remember the
it's the
decrease a
largest
bit.
class that we have.
What's that?
It's the largest class that we have. in
And how
our
many
district.
are at the tech schools now?
140, 42,
You have 140 out of 4 grades?
grade 8.
Tech schools.
Tech schools.
Oh, I'm talking about grade 8. I have nothing to do with tech.
Okay.
As I recall, the Neshoba Valley
With
Tech
those
was
last
a
ones,
year.
What?
It was 33 last year.
Okay,
Or for, you know,
33 out of 4 grades.
Correct.
May have been a low year, but didn't we have a particularly expensive case over to, which is going off the books, right?
Right.
To Minuteman, right?
And I just looked at this as Neshoba, so.
And that's all I had in my mind was Neshoba too.
So we got Minuteman because it's coming off the books.
Minuteman should be, this should be the last year for it.
But you don't know, somebody could sign up this year, you don't know, right?
Yeah.
Graduated, now the next one, we either graduated this year, I think it's this year.
This
This year, right?
Right,
So,
so for next year, it shouldn't be that.
It shouldn't be that.
That was like 20,000
20.
for that kid.
Just shy of 20.
Lawrence Academy.
Roadway charges, these are the, I'm sorry, other charges, which includes roadway. Roadway only increases by 1% as part of the financial plan that we have, but the larger of this increase includes the veterans' benefits, because these are other charges and services that we have. The veterans' benefits increased by $70,000. It's budgeted for $70,000, and that's what we think it's going to land at this year. I know John Borowski, presented the data at the hearing, so I've adjusted it for what we think it's really going to land at this year. This is one of those programs that if you don't pay it in the budget, you're going to pay it on the cherry sheet assessment, so you either pay now or pay later.
And we get most of it back anyway.
75% of it comes back in the following year, and we've been getting it, consistently, so it's one of those items you really need to plan for. Debt service is increasing by $210,000, primarily because of the roadway debt that we have programmed for this fiscal year for NAGOG and, gotta go back. For NAGOG and New Estate, payments will be made in fiscal 2017. Any declining debt service in our permanent debt, it gets reserved for capital, so, we don't let that slide into the operating budget, and we consistently do that. Employee retiree benefits, we have an increase of 8.62%. Again, level staffing. Health insurance makes up the major component of this, and we're estimating a double-digit increase of about 13% based on the current claims. However, the enrollment has kind of stabilized, so I've been able to recognize some savings there, so it didn't equate to a full, double-digit increase overall in employee retiree benefits. We also have the Opeb contribution in here, and that increases by 10% annually, again, per our financial policies.
Probably not the right place to bring this up, but I'm going to while we're looking at this, because we did talk before about if we add new employees, that we would fully fund OPEB for those new employees as part of the cost of bringing those on.
Correct.
And is that
That's what we did last
that
year.
is the policy,
That
so
is part
we
of-
are doing that now?
We are doing that.
So if we talk about any of these
Yeah.
later on, that will include that, the
Yes,
price,
those
the
adjustments
cost.
are made in the next
Okay.
slide.
Does that, and when the school department has numbers here in terms of adding staff?
I've
That's
added,
included.
they have the two that I knew of
Okay.
in the budget discussion, so I added for those.
All right, thank you.
What is available for capital? In fiscal 2016, we had $2.4 million. It was slightly higher last, well, it was a lot higher, by $348,000 last year, because we had debt service for roadway that I thought I was going to need in 16. We didn't, because we're placing the debt later, so we allowed that to go to capital. I'm going to be using that this year, so it's not available. But, there's still a healthy, $2.1 million total for capital and other warrant articles.
And only because you brought it up, Betsy, on the fully funded, it may be helpful to all of us if we all understand fully funded. Because we're not saying that we hire a new employee, works for 30 years, and then has a 30-year retirement that's going to equal $3 million on arbitrary numbers, that we're going to put $3 million in it this week.
No.
No, we're making, we have an
There's an actuarial table.
schedule
Right,
based
you have
on
to follow.
age and what, whether they're group 1 or group 2 or group 4, and there's male and female, so there's contribution amounts that we make in adjustments to OPEB annually for each new hire, and that was adopted under the...
It's a contribution based on actuarial estimates that'll fully fund it going through the out years.
At their
right?
age,
Right.
correct. And the average, I think, is like 6,000 per employee for, OPEB, but it's different.
We're putting more away,
Yeah, no,
every additional
we'll get
person.
that.
Okay, no, I appreciate you clarifying that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other amounts to be raised would be snow and ice deficits, cherry sheet charges. They're pretty consistent year to year. We did raise the full snow and ice deficit last year. I'm hoping that we won't this year.
So
But
far, so good.
Yeah, we said that last year at
That's
this
what we were
time.
last year, too.
Don't go there.
A lot of oscillations on our side this year.
yeah. So the total increase would be, again, 1.672 million, creating a surplus of $216,000 over the available fundings. This is the first time since I've been here that there's been, at this level of, budget review, a surplus of any amount, so.
But
And it
Go
just
ahead.
changed half an hour ago when the school department's figure, which changes the surplus of 200,000 to a deficit of 400,000.
Right.
But in truth, their numbers were on the table, at the beginning of November.
So we never were at 200,000, then
Right.
we're at negative 400,000, just so we know.
But the other important thing, I think, along with that, is if you look at the, the first slide, the second slide, 1.8 million increase over last year. Well, just with our level staffing, uses 1.6 of that. So we're not talking.
And the other thing to say about perhaps this early stage is that we went through an iterative process between the information we provided by the schools and reviewed by the finance team, which led to some, double checking of math and just basic understanding of what the costs were, which allowed us to come to a happier medium. And who knows, that may still happen, so.
Yep. Okay.
Mission requests. So this is the mission deficit would be just approximately $1.5 million, but in the town operating budgets, the increase would be significantly more. It's $887,000 or 11.4% instead of the 3.5%. The school appropriation, I had at the full $1,248,000 or 7.23% increase. School reserve spending, I had at the same levels. I think that with what we have for figures for school choice and for circuit breaker figures based on what's on the DESE website, it shows that it could support the same level of spending as was planned for 2016. They are expecting to have about 373 in school choice and circuit breaker funds at 893, so that's $1.2 million. So if you spent $1 million and change, you'd still have the same amount of reserves, but that's, I know, going to be discussed. Technical school, again, I have the same amount.
Now, the tech school assessment is a year in arrears, right? So it's...
Based on, yeah.
Right, so the 17 budget is based on the number of kids that are in there this year.
Right.
Somebody on
Somebody
God's
over there
earth
knows
must
what the
know
number is.
how many kids from Littleton are going to the tech school. So we ought to be able to plug a real number in there, right?
Don't they, you all have to report the enrollment in October?
They'll be sending that number in January to us as
Okay.
well, so.
Okay, so we'll have as real as any number is a real number
Just give you
of how many
perspective.
kids, right?
I've got some numbers from 11 to 14, and it's 47, 47, 50, 39. So, over those 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah. But historically,
It's 33.
the tech schools come before you and presented to you their budget. I don't know if that she's still doing that, the superintendent, but historically.
At the very end, we get it in February.
Well,
After
they
he
stop
does
in,
submit
but, and we go to their budget meeting, but for this, just knowing the number of kids is really what we need, and then we can plug do we have $150,000? Is $150,000 of our problem go away?
I don't know, for this,
or not?
the schools could act as the intermediary, but the relationship is the tech school with the town, not with the school district. So if we think that's important, then I think our town staff should be going to the tech school and getting the information directly, and takes the school department out of it.
Yeah,
Well, I didn't think they were,
yes.
I didn't think they were in it. My question to Kelly was that the Littleton School Department reports its enrollment figures to the Commonwealth and at some time, and I'm presuming that Neshoba Valley Tech adheres to the same schedule, whatever that
We've
is.
got a member or members on the school committee, couldn't we just have those folks, you know?
Yeah, I would offer
ask
the
them
same
to ask?
accountability you're asking of all of our departments in the town, we should be asking equally in Neshoba Valley Tech.
Sure.
And I understand we're but one town in the catchment area of them, but that may help us get a bit more understanding to us what goes on over there, in addition to our own departments, because it is our town money that's going to it for our kids. And your suggestion about our rep on the school committee is a good idea, for sure.
Yeah, it could confirm or deny whether they have $155,000 problem.
That's all I'm saying, is rather than having
Just confirm it.
two numbers up there, we should be able to nail it, because it is how many kids are going this year, we get charged for next year, because it's a year in arrears, so we ought to be able to put a number in there.
Is Charlie Ellis still our rep?
I'll email them and ask them.
Okay.
Other charges are primarily roadway. Jim Clyde had requested a larger figure for the roadway budget to address, some additional work for smaller road repairs that tend to get neglected with the larger roads, coming on. Debt service stays the same. Employee retiree benefits would go up by 12.7%, and this would incorporate all of the new hires that would be included in the mission budgets. And estimates for health insurance enrollment and everything. Available for capital, same figures. Other amounts to be raised, changed slightly because as the budget increases, so does the requirement to fund our stabilization account, because it has to stay at 5% of the operating budget. So it changes slightly to meet that threshold. And in all, it would increase by $3.4 million or 7.85%. Betsy had asked me to put this slide in to just detail the full-time equivalent impact, so the staffing increases as we go through the departments. So I did go through each one and tested them against the spreadsheets that they had submitted. IT was requesting an additional person for 15 hours a week, which would be new staff, non-benefit eligible. The town clerk was looking for an additional 5 hours for her hours, so it's existing staff. Planning board was looking for a 10-hour office support person, new staff, non-benefit eligible. Police were looking for a 2.4 FTE, or full-time equivalent increase, 2 full-time officers, and 1 part-time 16-hour-a-week reserve, all new staffing. Fire was looking for a 5 FTE increase for 5 full-time paramedics, all new staff. The school had referenced 2 FTE increases for 2 teachers, new staff. Highway was looking for 3 FTE, 3 new full-time employees, 1 engineering and 2 for parks labor, all new staff. Elder and Human Services was looking for 1.375 FTE increase, 1 full-time outreach worker, and a 15-hour-a-week driver, non-benefit eligible on the 15 hours and benefit on the full-time. Library was looking for a 24-hour increase to existing staff, which equates to 0.60. And the Veterans Agent was looking for an additional 3 hours, increasing the hours from 6 to 9, which is a small FTE increase. So the total is 15.20.
Only just to clarify on the library, does that mean, and I don't remember, I remember going through it on that Saturday, there was a lot of stuff said. Does that mean that that's going to be a benefited employee that wasn't a benefited employee with this increase of 24 hours?
It
or no?
could, with the additional hours. There are some that are right on the threshold that could be pushed into.
So we could have several employees becoming full benefits.
So putting on the library hat, I don't think the plan was to make anyone to create any new benefit eligible positions.
Okay.
I could be wrong. I don't. The plan was not to do that. It might end up happening, but that's not the intent.
Thanks, Mark.
But that'd be a good question to ask Sam, to, if it is or isn't the intent, because once it becomes a benefited employee, obviously, there's a significant uptick. It's not just the 24 hours, it's the 24 times the big multiplier.
I think it was taking positions that were already benefit eligible and adding hours to them.
That may very well be, but we can have Sam just clarify that for us.
I'll ask him. Okay. So to go through the departments, in general government, the level staffing budgets changes from, the changes that are included are an elections expense increase of $3,500.
Can you just talk about, because we went through this last year, you had these other categorizations, that you talk about general government, what is that?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So general government is anything that pretty much is not public safety, public works, culture, recreation.
So it is the town clerk
Yes.
and,
Town clerk, town administration, finance, any of the finance departments, any of the permitting regulatory boards.
This building, basically.
Basically, this, yes, this building here. With the
Okay.
exception of Roland, who is public safety.
Okay.
So the increase here is for an additional election that is scheduled for 2017. Normally, we budget $8,700, and that covers 2 elections. So Diane has a third, the town clerk has a third to deal with, that we will need to take care of. There are no additional staffing or hours. All the step increases are programmed as due for employees that are eligible for them. And a COLA is budgeted at 2%. In the mission budget for the department, for general government, there are the additional staffing increases for IT that I referenced, an additional increase for the town clerk for her hours, the additional 5, and an additional part-time clerk in the planning board. Public safety, which would include police, fire, inspections, dispatch, ambulance. The level staffing budget increase is $22,000 in the building inspector's budget. It's fully offset by the revolving account transfer, so the fees for those plumbing, gas, and electrical inspectors go into a revolving account. We budget them in the general fund, and we pull the money out to pay them. So it is fully offset. Doing it this way keeps it reflective of the actual activity, so if the fees are up because there's more inspections, then the wages go up, and then as the wages go down with fewer inspections, the budget gets adjusted. But in any case, it's neutral. No additional staffing or hours, all step increases, and a COLA for both union and non-union. The mission budget would reflect that almost 2.5%, 2.4 FTE increase for police, and 5 for fire. The fire would be to bring the department to paramedic level, or running at ALS versus BLS. I know the fire chief had gone through a pretty comprehensive display of that. The full year impact of running at an ALS level would potentially increase the revenue from the $350,000 that we're getting currently to $634,000. In 17, if it were approved, we'd be implementing it mid-year, so we would not be getting that full revenue stream in 17. So there'd be some, subsidy that the general fund would have to pick up at least in that first year. The annual 2017 net impact is estimated at $101,000, again, due to the mid-year implementation. It could be neutral in fiscal 2018 if the revenue projections were realized.
Now, back on the police side, and I guess the same question for the fire side, is the $59,000 or the $60,000 net of overtime. That does not include benefits or the Opeb hit for those individuals.
When I look at the full implementation of the $634,000 in revenue against what the fire chief had prepared, we did factor in the fringe increase.
But
And
not
it
on the
was,
police.
There was no revenue.
No, but I'm saying the $60,000 annual
Just
impact.
salary. That's
Which is
salary.
just salary. So there's benefits,
That are
which is
factored in.
which is actually high for police,
Yeah, they typically.
plus the Opeb hit. So
And they are factored in the fringe budget.
But it's factored into the fringe budget, but the real cost of adding the 2 police, or 2.4 police, is more than the net that the chief was able to get that down to. So the same
Yeah,
issue that we have, what does a person actually cost us? Right.
absolutely.
Education, this would include the school department and Neshoba Tech, or any other technical school assessments. Again, I had budgeted the $690,000 in over 2016 levels, or $17,940,000 for the appropriation. In the previous version, the steps and lanes were referenced as $583,000. I know it's changed, so I'll have to adjust this. And we hadn't received any specific detailed information at this point, but we're working on it. So I know that this will change. The technical school assessment we've gone through. Mission budget requests. This I pulled directly from the previous slide that was presented at the budget hearing. So again, this has changed. But the amount still being requested is just over 1.2 million. Okay, Public Works, which would include highway, cemetery, roadway expenses, anything in that nature.
Water department too in there or not?
Water department is an enterprise fund, so it's a separate, we haven't received any of the water department information as of yet. But Scott did say that as soon as he had it, come to Fincom.
We'll have the school department educate him on getting in the timeline that works for the rest of the town.
There is a 1% increase in the roadway appropriation budgeted at $7,700. There's an $8,200 increase in wastewater, stormwater expenses from the $91,800 that we have currently to $100,000. This is not inclusive of the new MS4 permit requirements for stormwater that we're estimating to come in 2017. We are working with the water department, and the town of Westford was very generous with their time to, have us discuss some of these issues with their consultant. So we're making gains in what we think the costs might be, but we'll develop those over the next few weeks.
Better or worse than what you were thinking? Not good, huh?
Hard to say. It could be, I think we put the $300,000 out there, be covered by some fee, or by some revenue stream is yet to be identified. We're not sure. We're hoping we can come in lower, maybe a lot lower, but not much. But within the next month, we'll have a plan. We're working with the Light and Water Department to develop a structure and a strategy for funding. Part of the information that we'll get by early next year is what the new draft EPA permit looks like, and that will indicate what the requirements are. For some short money, there is some consultant work which we'll have done to cost out for us. One of the folks we met in Westford was the consultant that they use to cost out what implementation would be, and it's and it would be some money well spent, under $10,000, but it's critical. It's critical for us to have a engineering analysis of what the requirements are for the EPA permit and what the likely cost would be for us to implement it. And Westford used that to help guide their efforts. And we need to have information of that caliber. We can't just guess.
So Keith, has Westford narrowed in on how they're going to assess that fee? Is it going to be a user tax or a user fee, or is it going to be a tax?
They had a proposal. I believe that they have a proposal for stormwater utility, but I don't know I'm not sure what the status of that is.
See, MMA, you guys get that conference coming up in January. I guess this is impacting everybody statewide. Have they got anything going on
It's
that front?
impacting everyone. The main effort with MMA is the Mass Municipal Association is to get is to convince the Commonwealth to accept, as all but a handful of other states have, to have EPA issue one license to the state, and then the state, through DEP, would then regulate all the cities and towns. The Commonwealth had declined to do that, even the previous administration, I guess, and that's still that's still the top ask at this point, so that we're not dealing with the federal government, we're dealing with the state government, who would at least be more understanding and reasonable of how, municipalities in Massachusetts.
At least find them easier.
Well, you
Yell at
can.
them.
But it's as we've said before, it's a steep learning curve. We've got plenty of company with the misery that will be associated with this. But we're looking for ways to we want to make sure that we're not proposing to spend more money than we need to, and we're looking for the fairest way to fund it and to bring those recommendations forward.
That should say wastewater, not water. Sorry. I just saw that.
Everywhere.
Yeah, water. Wastewater, the wastewater component is the municipal-owned wastewater treatment facility that takes care of this building and the schools. And so.
May I? Keith offered an excellent explanation. Thank you. I just want to clear up one euphemism he used, revenue source. It's the people of Littleton, their money.
Sure. Well, right. It comes from them in one way or another.
Yeah.
And we're looking at ways where they've already given us the money, and maybe we ought to reallocate it for this purpose rather than something else, rather than raising any additional money. So, there.
Also, in the level staffing budget, there's no additional hours. Step increases are programmed, and any COLAs, the 2% for union and non-union. In the mission budget, there's a 3 full-time equivalent increase in highway. It's part of the department operations study that was completed in fiscal 2015 by the Collins Center. This would be for engineering and 2 parks employees. The total is $159,597 for wages only. Fringe would be added on top of that. That's what that would be. The engineering position, we have discussed in looking at the funding, whether or not it would be advantageous to fund that out of the roadway appropriation, which we're spending a tremendous amount of money on outside engineering services, which need the oversight of somebody that we feel works for the town that can manage those contracts and make sure that we're getting all of the benefits that we need to. So it could be budget neutral for the salary component if we looked at it at that.
We're also taking a second and third look at what engineering capability we need to deal with the stormwater issue, and which may be even a great rationale for bringing a PE on staff, either as part of highway or as part of light and water, or some. So we're exploring those opportunities. And I should mention as well, the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Electric, Light, and Water Commissioners, they agreed to meet jointly. There's a long list of common topics. We're shooting for sometime in mid-January to be able to discuss stormwater, IT, pilot payments, a long list of things that are of common concern. And once we confirm a date, we'll publish that.
Yeah. One point on this, you wouldn't be eliminating outside engineering services, you'd just be reducing them, correct?
Correct. There are some things that we would be able to do in-house with an engineer, maybe some construction oversight, but we're still going to need.
If you had a PE in-house, that person could better manage the PEs that we have on contract.
Yeah. You talk the
Have you
same
considered
language.
the model of using a contractor for that work rather than having the employee of the town?
No.
I mean, same thing could apply if they're going to be managing engineering work. We have somebody on retainer like town council, and their incentive is to bring the cost down. It's all contract based and doesn't affect your Opeb.
We hadn't, and I fear that the more we look at the stormwater component as the basis for bringing a PE on board, the more likely it would be that needs to be an employee. who's under our control rather than a consultant, but we can certainly take a look at that. We had not looked at it.
Something ought to be at least explored.
Yeah.
Do you
So
see the south
bring-
side of what we discussed with Highway?
What?
Between, Green currently using their services and inside Highway perhaps going to an engineer? You see this as two different issues?
It would have to be the same issue. We're not going to hire, I don't see, there's no cause that we would be hiring two engineers.
I'm with you on that, but I
It
think
needs to
to
be
Paul's
one.
question, it's been discussed in the Board of Selectmen, and right now it's on hold, and just waiting to get more information and put it on a future agenda.
Yeah, if it's been discussed, fine, and if it, and if that helps spur it along, I just say it's something you ought to review internally.
First street level, that's been it.
Yeah.
So bring on a PE, do we currently have, or will we need hardware and software for that individual to function properly?
Probably, sure.
And is that included in any of these estimates?
The assessment, sure, it should be.
It's not at this level. What is included is we have the roadway new portal that we've purchased. But I'm sure that there are other, software models that might be used to track vehicle maintenance better or any other number of conditions.
And where are we on the new road assessment plan? Is it?
That's going to be up in
Where
January?
it's pushed off till January 25th will be the results. Mr. Carr asked that we not do it this week and reschedule for when he's here. So it will be in January.
Okay. Okay, so we'll have that as input if there's more pressure put on roads or less pressure put on roads, I don't know. The selectmen will be reviewing that at the end of January.
Well, in the short term, we're programmed. I mean, we're sort of making decisions now about what's the next road after the next one.
No, right, but, is it the one we expected, or is it two that we didn't expect?
I don't know.
But it will be reviewed.
It'll never be less.
But it'll be reviewed at selectmen at the end of January.
Right, yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
that's the
right.
answer,
And
okay.
we will have, we've seen the preliminary findings, we've seen some of the graphics that are available to help prioritize, and we'll have some good information and make decisions about. And we'll
Good.
have those in January.
That's good to have that updated.
Health and Human Services, which would cover veterans, Board of Health, and Council on Aging, and Director of Elder and Human Services. The veterans benefit, I referenced the increase from 120 to 175, a $55,000 increase, which is based on the current caseload. Board of Health.
It's not based on 3 more hours for John.
No. This is just benefits. The Board of Health assessments are appropriated at $52,780, which is an increase of about $6,000 over 16. The actual increases might be higher depending on the results of the Neshoba Associated Boards of Health retirement calculation increase. There's some discussion going on now about how that retirement gets funded and what portion of it needs to be funded by the local communities. I believe right now the only funding is the percentage that the employees kick into the state, and then the state's paying the assessment, but they need to...
What is this, something different for the Board of Health than for others?
Well, Neshoba Associated Board of Health
It's different for regional
Yeah,
entities.
okay.
So there might be an increase for the town to support the
Okay,
retirement.
I understand that.
Because they're-
They're okay.
Yeah,
Basically,
there's a
yeah,
legislative
make
study
their
going
problem
on
harder.
now which will point to some doable solution or continue to not solve it.
We only
Picking
pay
it on
a
the-
piece of that, right? We get our piece of the pie. All the other towns pay into that as well.
Right, and then they collect their fees for, certain services that they provide.
And to quote Keith, it ain't gonna be less.
I didn't expect that.
In the mission budget for Health and Human Services, $64,490 would be augmented into the Elder and Human Services budget. which results from the needs assessment study that was completed this fiscal year, which is recommending an additional full-time benefit-eligible outreach coordinator and a 15-hour-a-week non-benefit eligible driver position, and an increase to the veterans agent stipend of $2,500, which would basically cover another 3 hours a week for John to provide his services. I think he's working the 3 hours now.
I'm sure he is.
Absolutely.
Plus
He's here
some.
all the time.
Yeah.
2,500 around.
Yeah. I did take a look, the stipend hasn't changed in at least 10 years. It might not have changed, for 20, but I did go back 10 years, and it's been at 5,000 for at least 10 years, so it has not changed.
It's pretty decent.
Culture and Recreation, which would be Library and Parks and Recreation. The general fund subsidy to Parks and Rec would increase by $5,903 over the 16 levels, which basically would just cover the steps and lanes for the employees that subsidy is used to support. That's all it would do. No additional hours, no step increases and COLA, but no additional hours. The mission budget requests an additional increase of $22,000 for the library appropriation to provide the additional hours for existing employees. No additional hours would be open to the public. It's just additional staffing. And in the fringe and retiree expenses. Level funding budget, I did go through the changes. They result in about an 8.62% increase. Medical claims experience is running in excess of premium. So we're budgeting an increase of $341,000. Opeb increase of 10% or $86,000 over 16 levels, and a retirement assessment increase of $124,000. Medicare funding at 1.45% of salaries, and that's where we get that. Mission budget would increase it by $282,000 across these different categories to accommodate the additional 15 employees that we have referenced here. So.
Okay.
Debt service, increase of $210,000. Again, funds available through annual debt service budget reductions are made available only for capital or other one-time expenditures. They don't roll into the operating budget. Permanent debt decrease of $189,000, or long-term debt that's being retired or reduced annually. Short-term debt increase of $400,000 for roadway plan in 2017. You might remember I referenced that we had $350 budgeted for this year, but I didn't need to spend it, so we shifted it to capital. It's $400 for next year. This has been planned. It's all inside the levy limit for the roadway program.
And just as a reminder, that $189,000 that's going down, what is that?
It's across-the-board debt reduction, so...
It's nothing, no one thing that's making up the majority of that?
No,
School's the biggest piece of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, most of the debt service we carry is for the schools. But, there's decreases each year in the interest payments for, all of the projects that we have. And we have $4 million worth of debt in total. Kind of tough. Level staffing budget, again, this is the summary of the information. So the level staffing would have an increase of $1.6 million, almost $1.7 million, or 3.79%. And the mission would be $3.4 million. Variables that we have still in play. Revenues, state aid for both town and school are projected with a 1% increase over 2016 levels. The actual 2016 projected state aid is $33,000 less than what we received in 15. So state aid has been flat the last few years.
Right.
So 1%, I'm pretty comfortable with it, but it's going beyond that, I wouldn't be. New growth is projected at the $1.1 million that I had referenced earlier, based on the projects that are currently in the pipeline. If the contractors slow down their production or change their schedules, we're going to have to modify that. We're pretty confident where it is right now, based on the info that we have, but we have to monitor it.
Good working weather.
Local receipts are projected with a 1% increase over 2016. We did push these receipts for 2016, so we pushed them by about $200,000. So I want to make sure that that's sustainable before we, change that any further.
What are we plugging in for the hotel and meals?
100,000. Hotel is 100, meals is 200.
Okay.
Yep.
It's turned into real money. When it first
It
started,
is,
it was like,
yeah.
whatever,
It was
you know?
Nothing.
So again, if the hotel slows down their timeline, I might need to change the, lower max sized, so all of that is pretty closely.
Okay.
Expenditures that are in play, the tech assessment, we spoke about that. We'll hope to get you some better information. Health insurance premiums, we have a $341,000 increase programmed. The actual increases will be known sometime in February and March of 2016, but we're looking at probably 13%. The stormwater MS4 permit expenses, estimated impact from what we had received from Corey. He gave us that little spreadsheet. I deducted, he had, I think, $200,000 estimated for one of the studies, and I reduced it based on the consultant from Westford's comments. But when I added up what he thought the first year impact would be, it was at least $140,000.
And that's not in your numbers?
It's not in here because we don't have any,
We don't know, okay. But it's
but
coming.
it's a number that
Something's
I wanted to
coming.
give you something.
Right.
IT expenses, this is one of the things that'll be discussed
Right.
when the board meets with Light and Water, but they're looking to outsource some of their IT services rather than have in-house staff do it. They're looking to have consultants do it. There would be a cost to the town on oversight for our systems, so that conversation needs to be had. And based on the initial estimate that they provided, it looked like it might be $60,000 to $80,000. But it might be offset by reducing the request for additional staff in IT. So we need to have a further conversation on what that really
Well, or
is.
by just the change of the arrangement, because they're not doing it for free. I mean,
Lots of things to discuss.
so you're saying those last things are not in the mission budget?
They're
They're not there at all?
They're not, because we don't have any,
Okay.
I don't know if these are one-time costs or if they're going to be,
But okay, that's the show of a technical assessment, but you do have a big number already in the technical school. But that's, for the number of students, that's not the assessment, that's different.
Right.
Got it, okay.
right. Okay, so,
Funny, last summer, we were all struggling with the bigger than expected undesignated fund balance, and then we came up with some policies and adopted those to kind of how to deal with those, but
Yeah.
I think the hope was to fine tune some of the estimations, so that, is that coming up?
yeah. I
Okay,
actually
all
have
right,
that in
fine,
the,
then I will be quiet and let you address that.
Mark that day on your calendar.
Just letting her address it?
No, that he's going to be
Paul's going to be
quiet.
quiet.
For the time being.
Oh, there you go, okay, now we're back.
I'm always up to a challenge, Fred.
There you go.
capital.
Station identification.
There we go. Okay.
Company owned.
So what I did is went through all the department capital plan requests that were submitted for the budget hearing. I did receive a few late submittals, and I'll walk through them. But I did put them in priority order here for these slides, with the exception of facilities, because they kind of get gathered across all of the departments. They're not in priority order for that component, but all of the department equipment is in priority order as submitted. So,
So you have it in priority by requester, but not priority overall? We haven't done that step yet.
correct. So what do we have available for capital for 2017? We have unavailable funds between what's been reserved inside the levy and our normal use of undesignated fund balance, just over $2 million, or $2,095,000. In requests, we have $3,580,000. So there's a shortage. If everything got approved in a perfect world, there's a shortage of $1,485,000. This does not include any CPA available funds, but just to give you an idea, this is where we stand at this point. Where the funding becomes available is we have a $1,132,785 program from undesignated fund balance in accordance with our financial policies. So that's the amount that we use annually, if available and undesignated. We also have $962,000 in available funds inside the levy from accumulated debt service reduction. So this is the debt that we've been accumulating over the last 5 or 6 years. and it's up to 962. So we have just over $2 million available. Again, per the existing financial policies, these funds cannot be used for operating, even though they might be inside the levy or undesignated, they're reserved. Just to give a comparison from 15 to 16 to 17, to show the use of the funds, you can see the increased use of undesignated. As the budget increases, we can use a certain percentage of that amount on capital, so that's why this number tends to go up with it. The increase in the retired bonded debt, we did have some retirements in 15, which is why 16 went up kind of significantly. And then again, you can see it go up again for 2017 at 962. You can see in 2016, there's the $350,000 I referenced that I had budgeted in debt service but did not need because we did not place the debt for roadway yet. So we used that for capital. And any snow and ice funds that remained unexpended. We did have some in 15. We used $297,000 of it. So you can see we spent $1.7 million in 15, $2.1 million in 16, and we have just over $2 million available for 17.
Which we should all be very proud of, and
That's a great-
based on the policies and the things that everyone in the town is doing now. It allows us to have that, so we can deal with our capital needs without going for overrides all the time.
Well, we used to do
It's very
capital,
important.
capital exclusions quite a bit, and we stopped doing those in 2009, I think, because we were able to manage this.
And if you didn't do that, you wouldn't be in this position.
Correct. So we have $3.5 million in requested capital or other one-time projects to date. Other one-time projects would be things that are non-operating. So it might be a study. It's just something that we don't want to include in the operating budget to inflate it going forward. Some of the major items that I looked through the list and pulled out just to throw forward for you is things that might be classified as major capital projects, new construction or major renovations. We have the fire station design services that are requested at $530,000. This has been something that we've been talking about for 2 years, maybe. So we had planned on having this in for May of 2017. The plan also had us requesting construction funds for May of 2018. I'm sorry. Design, May of 2016, construction, May of 2017. Too many years open in my head. Facility study recommendations. The PMBC is requesting $734,000 to continue addressing the items identified in the needs assessment study that was completed in 2013. They are among several projects, but it's a large amount. It could be classified as major. And alumni field. This is kind of a multi-department issue. The school department did put $400,000 in their capital plan request at the last item to address the bleacher replacement, which is something that was identified in the facility study. Park and Rec has requested funding to be determined to address alumni field reconstruction, replacement, renovation. So I don't have a dollar figure for that, but it's at $400,000 just for bleachers. It seems like it would qualify for
On
major.
the Saturday meeting, what they asked for was the town to look at a plan to increase field hours, whether it's more fields or whether it's doing something to alumni field. Fred, their chairman, said they didn't care, but what they needed were more field hours for the kids. So I don't know if it's gone anywhere or whether everybody's assuming we're just going to carpet alumni field or what we're going to do, but that's going to be bigger than a bread box. So what the schools have put in as $400,000 for the bleachers and the field has got to be close, I don't know, close to 800 to $1 million. So
The
you're
Board of
probably talking $1.5
Selectmen-
million to do alumni field.
The Board of Selectmen did accept.
Keep going up.
Okay, I'm getting thumbs up over here, over in the corner, so
the numbers behind it,
beyond, so, when we're looking at this, we're really not looking at what some people in town are expecting us to try to do, which is $1.5 million plus for alumni
Right.
field.
I
Okay.
just want to comment on the 400,000. when I was looking at the various projection sheets, there was no placeholder in any out-year projection for the bleachers, and it's like,
Nobody stood up for it, right?
you know, whether it's this year or some year, but I think just getting it on the horizon, those bleachers need to be replaced, has to be on the fiscal plan. There, we're not recommending it being pursued as an independent project, because there's a lot of moving parts going on right now.
No,
That needs to be
absolutely.
looked at as one set of projects there. But we thought it was important to get it back onto the spreadsheets, that those bleachers need to be looked at.
No, I'm absolutely with you. I think what we tried to do with the, quote, 10-year capital plan was capture, quote, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And now, in the last 18 months, Alumni Field is the worst field in the world, and the bleachers need to be replaced, which, by the way, was on the plan, on the study that was done, but nobody picked up on it, to your point, to get it onto the plan. So I think it's absolutely the right thing to do, get it out there.
And we needed somebody in the town, so I mean, I'm
sponsor
glad
it,
the
yeah.
school department finally did that, so that's
Yeah,
good.
absolutely, absolutely.
The Board of Selectmen did accept in-kind services for engineering review of Alumni Field turf replacement, so there'll be some report coming out of that at some point that'll be.
That's fine. You just have to build your money.
So over the next
If it's in
few
kind,
months.
there's no money there.
No money.
What comes out of it kind is real money, a pile of real money.
So for the timeline, so the boards, all the boards that are involved are going to need to decide what items out of the requested should be included in the 17 plan, which items possibly could be funded by CPA funds and move them in that direction. All of the items should be prioritized by the end of January 2016 so that the Finance Department can start drafting our financing plan for your review. The approved financing plan then needs to be completed prior to the March 2016 general close of the warrant for annual town meeting, and then it'll be presented to the May 2016 annual town meeting. Typically what I'll do is draft a first pass at the plan for you, and then the boards tell me, no, take that one out, put that one in. So I will do that for your next meeting, but I just wanted to kind of give you an idea.
So the
of
3.4 does include the 400 that the
Yes.
school did, just
It
as
does.
a placeholder, if nothing else. It's in the
Yep.
3.4.
It does.
But what we don't have is anything for the fields.
Right.
Okay.
The Park and Rec submitted a capital plan request. They filled out all the documentation, but
But there's no money.
They said, we don't know what
The
it's going to cost.
3.4 does not include anything for any fields. So it's incremental to this.
It will increase
Or
that.
we've got to slice a lot out to accomplish that. Okay.
So the items that you're going to look at are in priority order within the department as defined by the department head or the requesting board. It includes equipment, vehicles, equipment, repairs, facility, so major building maintenance, infrastructure projects, new building, and other non-operating or one-time expenditures for maybe facility item reviews or items that are just one-time in nature. In summary, the police department is looking at requesting $162,330, fire at $502,000, highway at $350,000, schools just over $1 million, park and rec $3,410, library $5,000, cemetery $68,900, facility, which includes several different facilities, and we'll go through the detail on that, at $1,004,000, almost $1,005,000, and other non-operating is $10,000. So the total is $3.5 million. For police, the $162,000 represents the replacement of 2 marked vehicles, public safety radio system maintenance contract. This $12,000 protects over $1 million in infrastructure, so it pays for itself if something happens. $6,500 for cruiser maintenance, which is tires mostly. And $37,690 as a replacement request for a 2000 Chevy pickup with plow that they use to take care of their lot. In fire, $502,000 is requested, major equipment repair and maintenance for the apparatus. $12,000 for the replacement of 6 sets of turnout gear. This is an annual thing. They replace a certain number of sets each year to keep the the group together. 35,000 to replace Engine 3, which is a brush truck. They're looking to acquire a military surplus vehicle to replace a 1994 vehicle, and then outfit or retrofit that as necessary for fire response.
That's an Abrams tank.
Wasn't that donated?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the 35 is just to outfit it and get the,
Right.
Yeah. the correct equipment on it.
You got their engine 3 to be auctioned off. That is not, there's no estimate for what you get for that in auction, right?
He put at a $25,000 minimum to,
To auction it.
yeah.
And that's not in that figure of 35,000, right?
No,
Okay.
no, because if that happened, then those funds would go to the general fund.
Got it.
Close to that. Other fire equipment, 140,000. If the ALS upgrade, the mission budget were approved for fire, which is the addition of the 5 staff to run at an ALS level, the 2 existing ambulance units would need to have some equipment outfitted with, to run at the paramedic level, cardiac monitors and such. And they're estimating 140,000 for that.
So that if the town decided to go forward with it, it looked like the FY17 budget would have to fund approximately 100,000 because we wouldn't have the receipts to
Correct.
cover the whole thing for 17,
Yep.
plus 140.
Correct.
So it's 250,000, 245,000.
This 140 could be paid from the accumulated balance in the ambulance receipts, because the way that we budget it now, we
Okay, so we've got
we collect the
enough.
receipts and then we appropriate money to offset the fire department
So
budget.
this could be out of money that we've already accrued.
Correct. It
But
could.
that would push us a little bit back for the next ambulance that comes down the road.
Yes.
So we'd have to look at what his timing is on the next ambulance to see if that makes sense or not.
You are correct.
So, but you're talking cash flow, in terms of just the discussion of, is this self-funding or not? Whether this money is there or not doesn't matter. Well, because if you say,
It's 140,000 that you're going to spend.
no, but the paramedic, the income from the paramedics doesn't, we're
It's not
saying-
gonna-
That's what I'm saying, it's not going to cover this.
No.
No.
Right.
No.
That's all, I'm just,
Yep. They are requesting, at this point, there's 300,000 in requested funding for self-contained breathing apparatus of the Scott Pax replacements. The equipment is, I think, 2004, so it's over 10 years old. They did apply, they're seeking grant funding with FEMA, and if it's approved, then our local match would only be 15,000. So there's a potential that this could go down significantly if we're awarded the grant from FEMA. So we'll have to monitor that as we go forward. But, you know, it is equipment that is out of compliance with the NFPA requirements. And it's important. Highway is looking for 350,000, 18,000 for major equipment repair for their apparatus, 25,000 for a sidewalk plow. That would, it would replace a 2002 trackless MT5 sidewalk plow. 60,000 for a Bobcat skid steer loader, replacement for a 99. 6,500 for a trailer refurbishment. It's an equipment trailer, so enclosed. 19,000 for a forklift. They're looking to do this as an addition to fleet, but purchase a refurbished or a used one. 16,500 also for a used road paver for an addition to their fleet. 9,990 for a flatbed for the hook trucks. This would be something that would be used for the existing equipment. And 62,000 for a batwing mower. I don't know what that is. To replace a 1997 model.
Don't keep it in the bad cave.
So for the school, the request was for $1,005,000. And $35,000 for teacher laptop lease agreement. This is the third payment of a 3-year agreement, so this is the final payment for that.
well, but it's a lease, so what happens next year?
There'll be another lease.
Okay, so it's, the third payment of 3 years doesn't, it makes it sound like we're done paying.
For this one.
Just means it'll go up next year. It'll be a higher lease.
55,000 for high school card access system, 30,000 for paper lane card access system, 20,000 for high school lockers.
So what is the card access system? What is the card access system for the schools?
It's a proximity card reader for the doors, for all the doors, similar to what's at middle school and what's at Russell Street. So you walk up, it's a proximity card reader.
So, okay, so teachers and things like that would have them, but the kids
Slide.
push a
Right.
button or something, or parents have to push a button or something and get allowed in?
Right.
And I think that came out of the security.
That came out of the Security Council recommendation and the security report.
And
School already have that.
40,000 for MacBook Airs.
We have it at 2 schools.
High school doesn't have it?
No.
Doors are just locked, you just buzz yourself in or?
Correct.
If you want, okay.
Do you want to say anything on any of these? Or
Only if they have questions.
anyone?
Okay, what can you do with 100,000? We'll start there, right?
Next slide. 25,000 for system-wide technology equipment, 50,000 for school resource materials, 40,000 for high school Kiva room upgrades, 27,000.
Excuse me, all kidding aside, in the numbers that Mike presented earlier, he had 100,000 for materials and resources, and I understand that, those basically are programs and whatnot, but here we have 50,000 sort of as a capital line item for the same, what looks to be the same thing. So
Right.
the distinction there, I mean,
Well,
why are we
right.
doing it both ways? Or
Well, what we're trying to do, because of the lack of funding for resource replacement, it's been since the mid-2000s since we've replaced resources, and we've obviously had new standards, state standards put in place. So that additional 50 would be for other resources, so that we could try to catch up. We should be reviewing our resources every 5 years. And there is a number of courses that haven't been reviewed in the past 10 years. So we're behind, and we're trying to catch up in a reasonable fashion.
But, okay, I guess
We could have
I
put it all
didn't
in
ask my
operation.
question, why isn't this 50, 150, and not have it in the operating budget? is
The
question.
school committee would prefer to bring the resources back into the operating budget rather than the capital budget.
Okay, then the 50,000 that's in the capital should be in the operating budget, and that should be 150,000.
We could certainly do that.
I mean, it just seems like it's all over the place.
Well,
It's not consistent.
And the reason you prefer to have it in the operating budget?
It's a recurring cost from year to year. It's something that you can't operate a school system without replenishing resources throughout time. Putting it in a capital, there's an opportunity for less chance perhaps of it being put into the budget every year. This is something that should happen every year. It's not something that should happen every 5 years, for example.
But I was interpreting a distinction here, that this was being considered one time because it was catching up on lost ground, whereas the other was more just annual operational change. So I can appreciate a distinction between the two, having some in the operating budget and having some just be capital.
We're really at the cusp of converting over to electronic resources. And it's just a matter of how quickly the publishers get on board to do that.
Okay, so
Some of the discussion we have with other town departments, because there's a lot of things in the capital that are in that same boat. I mean,
Right, that's
the
what I'm
tires for the
saying.
police
I said
department,
that
right?
it
I
should
mean,
be in the
you're going to need them
operating
all the
budget, it
time.
should be in the operating
Some of the
budget.
discussion of having it in the capital is that that's what it gets used for. It's not in the department budget to be used for something else, and so there's pluses and minuses with doing it both ways, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Let's see, 27,000 for auto scrubbers, 20,000 for Shaker Lane carpet replacements at the library, 20,000 for paint and repairs at Russell Street, and 20,000 for custodial equipment. 13,000 for landscaping, front building, I don't know what building it wasn't referenced on the spreadsheet.
Landscaping, that would be Russell Street. If you've been to Russell Street, it looks pretty bad. The bricks are all caving in the ground and all sorts of stuff, so.
And the same thing for the kitchen equipment, I wasn't sure what.
That Shaker Lane, I'm sorry.
Okay, no,
Shaker, okay.
Shaker. And that's $75,000 for kitchen equipment. $20,000 for handicapped accessible doors at Shaker and the high school. And $40,000 for the high school broadcast room upgrades. $75,000 for parking lot lights to replace them with LED lights, which has a return on investment of 28 months estimated.
Where are those at specifically? Is that at the high school?
Where what?
The new lights going in, the replacement lights?
If I recall, that was all 4 schools.
Okay. I guess the real question I should ask, are these going to shine brighter or less brighter into my bedroom window?
That depends.
Just turn the right direction.
Keeps your electric bill down.
And the
Well, I
400.
guess, I mean, I'll just be the bad guy on that one. So that also means there's going to be a decrease in the line for the electric bill, right, for every year too, for the
I
ROI?
think that project would want to also be looked at in terms of the overall green grants and
yeah,
any other pieces there, again, you know, not as a fully independent project type of thing.
Maybe it's a placeholder.
Yeah.
That is a good point, Betsy. That accompanied with the fact that we're using our schools more and more. So a lot of these savings that we're incurring throughout time is preventing cost increases in terms of energy.
Sure, absolutely.
So it's worked out quite well.
Yep, and, you know, wherever you know those things, I mean, it's good to highlight those and to share them so that people get a feeling. I think there's a lot of things get done in the town, a lot of efficiencies that get made, and extra things that are done, and we all take it for granted rather than...
Shine an LED light on.
Yes, exactly.
And the last item is the $400,000 reference for the alumni field bleachers. Park and Rec. There's one.
Excuse me, along the same lines, has anybody worked with the light department in terms of solar panels for any of the roofs for the schools? I don't know, it's just, you know, you see them all over the state, and I don't know whether that's something that makes sense or doesn't make sense for us.
We had a vendor in, and moving away from roof panels because there's some issues in terms of roof structure, et cetera.
Yeah.
It's probably not the best. So they were offering parking lot structures. And when we explored the opportunity with Keith and Light and Water, they didn't feel that the savings would warrant moving forward with those projects.
Okay.
One of the drawbacks to having low electric rates is that,
Yeah, it's hard to get a payback.
that's why we don't have a solar array on a closed landfill.
On the other hand, the more power Littleton Electric can sell, that's very attractive for Little Electric Company to sell their power. So
They may be
that's
required to
not
buy
a-
that much of it, and so I'm not sure that, I don't know how all that math actually works out, but I'm not sure.
We'll add that to the list that we talked with
Okay.
Light Commissioner.
What they pay for solar is more than what they pay for other, and they have it, they're getting their 3%, I don't think they want any more than that because it's more expensive than the other stuff.
So have your electric bill go down another 13%,
No, but I'm saying the solar is more expensive to them than the other
Expensive.
power than they get.
but it's still cheaper than other people are paying, so they can sell it.
To somebody else.
Absolutely, that they sell power. I mean, they're in the brokering business, absolutely. Don't undersell it. Okay.
Okay.
Park and Rec is requesting a small item, $3,410 for a computer registration system upgrade. Their current system was purchased in 2008. It's out of date. It's not compliant with new Bank of America and frankly all of the other bank requirements for the chip readers. And it includes training, so it's a one-time.
That's a big deal
Yeah.
in all retail.
Yep, absolutely.
My line of work, we're dealing with it.
The library is requesting a small item, $5,000 for furnishings.
There's no place, even a placeholder for the field here.
I'm not done.
Shut up.
Whack him on.
Hey, I haven't said anything yet.
Do a ruler or something, so you reach it.
The library is requesting $5,000 for furnishings. They generally used to get, a few $1,000s annually. They did not get any funding last year for furnishings replacement, so they did want to impress the importance of that. Cemetery, $68,900 for a backhoe replacement. Craig did look at getting this refurbished, and the cost is about $31,000 to refurbish it, and it might expend the life about 3 years. So at that point, he said
This
it's
was
really, it's worth,
1996, so.
yeah, worth looking at.
I don't know about 3 years. The little bit that they use it up there, I think would last more than 3 years, but
I think he got that from Highway. That was one that was used heavily in Highway, and he could put it over there, and now it's vulnerable. But that's where that is. Facility related. So we have $1,473,000 in requests. It includes $734,000 from PMBC, which includes paving at Russell Street, Town Hall roof, the second level at the library section. There's many different sections of the roof here. So this is this particular section of the library. The Town Hall rooftop units and HVAC units, another section of those to be replaced. Town Hall parking lot crack repair, Shaker Lane paving. They did some paving this year. There's more to be programmed for in the next round. Also the 7 unit events at Shaker Lane.
That'll
And
complete all the univents.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's been kind of
Great.
trying to get them all done at once now. And engineering for all the work that needs to be done.
So, Steve, this is, we did the study and they had their list, but this is that sanitized by people who have gone out and looked and know these things, right?
Yeah, the study, we modify the study as we go along. As we see additional work that's required, like the Shaker Lane paving, the study suggested that we do crack repair on the back parking lot. And when we really looked at it closely with Jimmy Clyde, he said that would be a waste of money. So we, working with, everyone in town, came up with the funds to completely repave that area and provide the required drainage so that the existing condition didn't reoccur.
Very good.
How, just going back to the schools list, there are several projects that look like projects that you guys would manage if they were town-side projects.
Well,
The
for example, the
kitchen,
Shaker Lane repair work.
Some of the other kinds
might
of things.
dovetail with
How
what we're
does
gonna
that
do.
work, Kelly? Does the school handle it, or does PMBC work with you guys?
We have a conversation with PMBC, and we come to a mutual agreement in terms of who has the capacity to
Okay.
handle the project.
Okay, so they're at least in the loop, and that if
Right,
they have
so-
expertise, they can
So I
bring
think
it.
Steve Mark will actually execute Shaker Lane 7-unit univent replacement.
Yeah.
PNBC won't do it, but he'll do it on their behalf.
Anything inside the building, Steve Mark usually takes care of, or on the roof. And then outside, on the grounds, we coordinate with Steve.
And you usually have to bring in somebody else from outside to
Yeah.
to do the work.
Okay, all right. That's just-
I think it's been working pretty
Because
well.
we're,
Very well.
Yeah.
because we're sort of looking at how much we're spending on maintaining the buildings, and what we normally see is, okay, $734,000 that PMBC is recommending for projects, and there's another 100 and maybe close to 200 sort of buried within the school capital that would be layered on top of that. So it's more like $850,000 the town is spending on keeping the facilities up. Okay.
Yeah, but I think like if we use like the council on aging kitchen repairs versus the school's kitchen, it's quite easier for Steve to manage that project inside the school building than trying to ask
Correct.
PNBC to bring somebody in.
That's fine.
You
I
know.
just-
So it just matters of which pot of money, do you want to, where do you want to put it physically in the budget?
Yeah, no, I think when we're thinking of how much we're spending on keeping the facilities up, we should be taking what you guys are doing plus what the schools are doing. We're spending more like $850,000, not $750,000, just for upkeep and maintenance. Okay, good.
Other facility-related items, there's the $530,000 for the fire station addition design work. There is $6,000 for the modular building lease, which is attached to the fire station now, the sleeping quarters. There is $14,000 for the fire station LCTV community room. This would be paid out of the PEG access funds, But it would be an item that would be appropriated, and so that they could do the design work and procure whatever they needed to do along with the project. $12,000 for the police station to do interior carpet replacement and paint needs. This came in later. It's a request from the Littleton Children's Fund, which is looking for $100,000 to address the Castle in the Trees project. The total project cost is estimated to cost about $300,000 if it's a community build project. Towards that, they've received $100,000 in state funding and $100,000 in donated services and fundraising. It's about $75,000 in donated services for Cataldo to do the actual demo and site work. And then they've got about $25,000 in actual cash donations. So, they're looking to, they're hopeful that this project could start in September of 2016, so they wanted to get something out there. It may be, community preservation type of funding that might be available, but they wanted to make sure that it was
On the radar.
in the plan.
Yep.
So who is bringing it forward? Is there any department in town supporting it, or is it the Castle in the Trees group?
Park and Rec did not request it because, from my understanding with Park and Rec, they felt that they had received a tremendous amount of pressure to request something be done with Alumni Field. So they wanted to make that their focus for facility.
I'm sure they did.
I don't know. They, not that it's not a...
Have the selectmen met with these folks independently?
Yeah.
Okay, so...
Okay. All right, so...
They're on our radar screen. We gladly accepted or thanked the legislators for getting us the $100,000 for the project, but it is with the understanding that we don't get to spend that $100,000 in state money unless the rest of the project cost is met, and now we see that the delta is...
The delta is out there, so, okay.
Is there a time limitation on that spending?
I think I'm not certain, but I think the appropriation has to be spent by the end of next year. But we can be certain.
Fiscal year, end of the calendar year. End of fiscal year 17? Okay.
But we'll confirm that.
Okay.
$50,000 is requested, Park and Rec for facility and grounds maintenance. This was done in this fiscal year also. It covers any of the needs of the larger facilities like Long Lake Park, Beach, Bay Park, any of the facilities that would need to be maintained should Park and Rec not be even doing programming. These are maintenance costs that are not funded through usage fees. And again, it started in 2016.
If those are maintenance things that need to be done for the park to open, for the beach to be usable, it really should be part of the operating budget and not here.
I agree.
The idea of
That's what
putting
that
this
is.
here is that this could only be spent on maintenance for those facilities. Putting it in the operating budget,
Now you can use it for other things. We're back to that same discussion
It could
again.
be used
Right,
for
right,
other...
right. Then use it for something else.
Then you got weeds.
And we're back to the same place, okay.
So by allocating it here, they can only be used for that. They're also looking at requesting $17,117 for 300 King Street for the fencing and the fit course, which is like a fitness course that would go around the facility.
By
Again,
fencing, you mean like fences, not APs and savers?
To keep the balls from running out on the highway.
I was
think.
thinking that, you said.
That's it. It's a
Yeah.
4-foot-high chain link fence to keep the balls from going down the...
I know, shaking my head.
And then as unknown, Alumni Field. So the replacement or repairs to Alumni Field turf as it exists now, the cost is going to be determined after the engineering review is complete.
And what's the timing on that? The engineering review and what comes next with all this thing?
I don't know when he's
No
going
idea.
to have it.
Yeah, when's the in-kind
I would imagine,
He's working on
proposal
that.
to carpet?
Couple months?
yeah, I would imagine. I know the fellow's working on it.
Yeah.
So the expectation is that there will be a request for this budget cycle
Yes,
for capital to do that.
that is what I have been
Okay.
told. And then this is just a number that was plugged at 10,000 for ongoing maintenance. We don't know what that's going to be. That's going to come out of that study. So whatever the study says, this is the cost to
So
repair,
that's not the
replace.
existing ongoing maintenance, that's
That's the
a
other-
projection for the new
It's
field.
it's a
You have to
placeholder.
do funky things
Well,
to the field.
and
yeah.
and then the
Puts a little
discussion
rubber
is,
down or whatever you gotta
do we
do.
also have to put in $100,000 a year because you have to replace it in 10 years? And so you
Exactly.
start putting money away right now to do that.
But that was one of the things that the consultant was going to look at, ongoing maintenance costs for different types of. so.
Makes sense.
One thing that I think when they were talking about, you know, something about alumni field, it also bring up the discussion, where are we programming life cycle repairs of the rest of the fields? You know, right now, there's enough money to maybe do some fertilizer and cutting them, but there's no money to actually retrofit a field and take it out of service and plow it under, reseed it, lay it fallow, and then bring it up to standards. That's another number that's not in anybody's budget at this point.
It's just like the building maintenance that we really kind of neglected for years. We had a similar situation on playing surfaces.
Right.
They're not going to get better by themselves, right?
No.
Right. They're only going to get worse, yeah.
And the final item is a non-recurring operating, non-operating. It's a $10,000 request for the historic resource survey that was discussed at the budget hearing. It's a one-time expense. We would hire a consultant.
And that was to sort of finish it, that was started years ago, right?
Right.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Future planning. You know, part of the capital discussion in prior years has revolved around planning for future projects like the fire station and other things that might be coming online. We did establish the Capital Stabilization Fund. In prior years, we have made appropriations into that out of the funds available for capital. The current balance is $392,000 as of today, and we do address it annually, at least with a minimum of a 1% of the total capital expenditures appropriation into this. The 1% is just to get it on the table for discussion. I mean, you know, in prior years, we've tried to do more than that, but it's required at least one, so that.
But to Darrell's point, that might be a place to, you know, if we can agree on, if somebody can tell us what the right number is for field reconstruction, or if in fact, if we do turf a field, if it really only does have a 10-year life, you know, to your point, it's $100,000 or $50,000 a year we put in there knowing that we're going to have $1 million bill, or by that time, $1.5 million bill to replace it. That may be the place to, you know, to salt it away and earmark it so that somebody else doesn't go in and get it. So,
We also have discussions around a debt exclusion stabilization fund, which was addressed in the financial policies. A debt exclusion stabilization fund could be used to pay either excluded debt service payments on existing projects, or you could use it to reduce the amount borrowed for new debt exclusion projects. So if you put money into this, say you had $1 million accumulated and you were ready to place the fire station debt, you could reduce the, instead of a $7 million project issued, you'd bond it for $6 and go forward from there. Or you could just salt money away into it and then use it to apply to excluded debt rather than raise it on the residence levy. So it would be a savings in either way. The Financial Policies Committee will be reconvening in January, I believe that's what you said, to discuss funding level recommendations for, both capital stabilization, debt excluded stabilization, and any other reserves that we might have. Other pressures, items identified in the facility study haven't been fully funded. Obviously, that it's about $1 million a year that we'd need to spend in order to really address all of the items in that study. We've funded $995,000 of the $3.3 million in recommendations from the period of 2013 to 2016. So, as we delay some of those, the cost may increase.
Well,
repairs may.
Can I just ask that question, go back to Steve again? So, that's based on that original study. So now, based on the list of things that need to get done, you came forward with, here's our list. Are there other things on the thing we really need to do it, but we don't think we should ask for it this year? Or I think we really are addressing the critical items?
Well, we think we're addressing the critical items, but keep in mind that facilities study only covered 5 of the buildings in the township. Doesn't address all of them.
Okay.
So we kind of go outside of that study as need be. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to get a feel for, from your standpoint, are we doing an adequate job of funding the maintenance that needs to be done at this point? Because we always felt like in the past we were really severely underfunding that. I know we're doing better, but are we in the ballpark now or not?
I'd say just by the numbers, we're not. I'd have to go back and look at all of the deferred maintenance, deferred capital projects that we have on the list.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, if we could do that, and if there are any sort of big ones, I don't know, a roof just comes to mind, that if we have a roof out there that's getting close to the end of its useful life, should we get that up on the radar for the next 2 or 3 years or something? Should we start putting money away for it? So, yeah, that would be a useful thing for us to
Sure.
know.
Steve, not to talk out of turn on the CMEC, but it's also our capacity to manage all those projects going on concurrently too, because I think we're pretty much at the limit how many, just based on the activity at the meetings that day, I don't know if you can put very many more projects on the list that you'd have to try to make sure that we're managed properly.
And then once we start talking about the library, that's going to come in, I'll address that also.
Right.
Yep.
So it's kind of a...
That's a very good point.
It's a big balance of
Well,
here.
but again, if the work needs to be done, then, and we're not staffed properly, do you do the work, do you staff properly and do the work? Do you not staff properly and have your building fall down?
Well, in some cases, such as 300 King Street, we had a owner's project manager. Was it Gail?
Or was that in Green?
Green. It was either Green or Gale, I can't remember which one.
I think it was great.
And they had somebody that would come over and periodically check the quality of the work, the progress of the work. And, not that we wouldn't stop by ourselves, but we weren't out there measuring pavement thickness and that kind of stuff. So.
Okay. It's just a good, once a year, it's a good time to ask the question and look at it, and if there are things like the bleachers that nobody was throwing on the list, well, maybe there's a roof that nobody's throwing on the list, I don't know.
Other items are the future building projects that could be requested. There were funding plans and requests and discussions, and some are unknown at this point, but the library, I know that I did forward you the Board of Selectmen's agenda item from last night to establish a library site selection advisory committee, of which they will be a finance committee member. The senior center, I know that those discussions have happened in the past. It might be something for the future.
Been around a long time.
Recreation
Even the kitchen.
center also.
So, and I would say to that one, to the last slide, to the last item, that those are the capital things and the building projects that are out there, but the other, elephants in the room, if you will, that go along with that same discussion, it's Opeb, it's the roads in town, it's,
And also land purchases to the
Yeah,
extent that they
that's
are
right.
covered by CP.
and that's because that's not there at all.
CPC
None of the land
funds, too.
purchases are up here, right?
That's true.
Yeah,
Can I,
Cooper Farm's not up there.
What's that?
Cooper Farm isn't.
Right, that's
Right.
exactly.
And-
And all these other ones that seem to be talked about all the time. Yeah.
Can I, is that your last slide?
That's my last
All right, well, the question I was going to ask at the beginning wasn't addressed there, as good as this was, because if you go back to slide 4
Leave something out.
on undesignated fund balance, that might, when we were hit last summer with our undesignated fund balance number back from the DOR, I think we were all surprised that it was bigger than projected, and then the trend line over the past few years that had been growing for a few years, we, some of that meant that we had a lot of cash on the table that had to be, no shortage of applicants for, but we needed a process for addressing that, and that seems to be what's taking place here, is how to allocate that money, but that was only half the question. The other half was, why were we in that position of having so much undesignated fund balance, and are our estimates, can they all be reviewed or fine-tuned so that we aren't getting that way? I see the projection showing that we're actually going to be getting, or it shows continued growth. I mean, it wasn't too many years ago, we were down to 600,000, right? Whereas by FY17, we're looking at close to double that.
Right. The undesignated fund balance increases were primarily, in the past year, a huge part of it was one-time or spikes in particular revenues, like building permits. If we budget, building permits normally come in between $250,000 and $300,000 annually. We had $750,000 come in building permits last year. If you budget that as an operating expense, you're gonna set yourself up for failure in the following year, or when this decline comes back into play. So what we do is we budget for the norm, and then the rest goes to free cash.
Maybe it'd be helpful then in some of our early budget planning documents, or even, mid-year, if you've got a number you're calculating, you obviously arrive at that somehow, a summary of where that is coming from, because, as I say, it may be one-year spikes that are driving it, but there was a trend line where it kept growing, at least for the past 5 years, right? Or more or less.
Well, and another part of that is, under the financial policies, 10% of new revenues do not get programmed into the operating budget, and that's done so that we can replenish free cash and build it. We've had a lot of activity, the permit end of it was really what was driving it, and we had a big spike in excise receipts too, because of new residents. It's not just newer vehicles, it's more people, more cars, more...
I'm not disputing that there aren't good reasons for it, I'm just saying, is it
I think it's something that when I was looking at my budget worksheets for this fiscal year, I was looking at culling out some of the information for the spikes, and looking at maybe pulling that into capital as a one-time, available resource for one-time types of
And I
things.
know, and we've got a good process for
And that
doing
would-
just that now, too.
Right, but it would eliminate the process of it going immediately into free cash and creating, the higher level of free cash to appropriate it out as an option, or put
Either
it to
way, most of it's
reserves.
going to capital anyway, it sounds like, anyway.
Right.
But-
Okay. It's just, in general, the notion that, an undesignated fund balance is something you, in your budget, didn't plan for, and you ended up with an overage. So isn't, on the one hand, it's great to have, if you're running a business, well, even there, you want to project your revenues accurately, right? So-
Could have gone the other way, though, if in
Sure.
if in
Ah,
the
nobody
real
disputes
world
that.
the economy didn't continue to heat up.
Yeah, but I think, and this point's been made before, the point is, what's, accuracy is what we ought to be aiming toward.
I think accuracy is there, it's the planning, it's the 10% of new revenues needs to not be appropriated and go to free cash. The spikes in other types of revenues, the permit fees, needs not to be appropriated and goes to free cash. So I think maybe just having that information out
Earlier, so
clearer,
we would know it, yeah.
so that you're aware that that's what's going to come up next year, or making the decision to appropriate it for reserves, so that it doesn't,
So what you don't want to do is hire people based on that money, because it may not be there every year. That's the bottom line of all this, right?
Right, that's,
But even if we're getting into an era now where we get close, about $1 million, where we anticipate that money's going to be free before the fall special town meeting, when people want to spend it, the problem we wanted to get away from is, having it be considered as found money, this landed from the sky, So now if it's more part of the process, I know that that's, in the policies that have been updated to that end. I just was addressing the other question
That's
about...
why you want to make sure that you're putting it all in the reserves, in the savings account, if you will, so that
Well, maybe to PJ's question earlier, why are we, should we be taxing to the max if we're ending up with $1 million in revenue in excess of what we budgeted?
Well,
you can decide if you don't want to do that, or if you don't want to build new
Yeah.
facilities.
Yeah, that's it, really.
well, we need
Like when you
to,
put money in the savings account, it's...
we do need to budget to generate at least $1 million in free cash annually, so that we can replenish the capital plan. The balance that we have now is an accumulation of 10 years' worth of, careful planning and, putting, not
Discipline and all these
appropriating.
other
But I
things.
think you can do this a different way. You could look at it from like a sales projection or a receipt projection separately than the budget. So that at least, to Paul's point, you kind of know that you've got revenues
Yeah, I think
coming in,
just
and
having
what
this-
those revenue streams are going to be, and where those projections are going to be.
Right.
Versus tying it to the budget and saying, well, this is definitely going to be there. Kind of keep it separate. Does that help you, Paul?
Yeah, I would like to feel more comfortable in October saying, yep, it's at $1.1 million, that's what we budgeted, and here's why, or it's not, and here's why, rather than just kind of be surprised by a number. I know you're not, but maybe it just needs to be integrated into the, the boards and circulation so that we know what's going on there.
So, Keith, did you have something else you were going to, because you were trying to talk, and there's another conversation going on here, and I didn't know if I cut you, I didn't mean to cut you off if I did.
Sorry, I'm sure it was just something pithy, but it's...
Okay.
Just one other question. The last slide just sort of sparked a thought here. What does the horizon look like for the schools needing bricks and mortar? Earlier we were expecting 30 some odd new students from the 40B, and luckily they all didn't slam into kindergarten or wherever. They sort of spread around a little bit. Is that sort of still the number, or are you seeing continued increase from, pick on the 40B, but from all the new houses that are popping up all over town? Joe's selling them they aren't selling them to 55-plus people, they're selling them to people with kids.
So far, we've been fortunate to absorb the students into our system, but we're getting closer to capacity in our schools. We don't have any free classrooms.
Right. So
our class sizes obviously were increasing because of that. It's really hard to predict what age groups you're going to get in. The 40B complex at this point in time hasn't given us a lot of students, but my understanding is there's a lot of turnover in those complexes as well. I believe they have 3 month leads.
Just picking on that as a big chunk up there, but there are houses going up all over the street, all over the place.
Our enrollment, go ahead.
I was going to say, the other part, is it cascades into our choice-in students.
Right.
Because the more we have to absorb the capacity there, the less we'll have for choice-in money.
Right.
Because that's where it's supposed to come from, there before we add building capacity.
You gotta have the room first before you can offer the spots, right?
Right, but we got to start giving up those spots once we start hitting enrollment pressures there, which then decreases the flexibility in the other part of the budget for offsetting the cost.
Once you accept a choice student,
They're ours.
we own them
They're
until
ours.
they graduate or they decide to leave, right?
Correct.
So the choice issue sort of matriculates out if in fact it's backfilled by Littleton kids, right?
Right.
Okay.
It's really hard to predict because we could have a situation where we had to hire more elementary staff, and it would give us increased opportunity for more choice students to a certain point as the town was growing. The key is to try to predict that growth so that you're minimizing the staff hiring as you move forward.
That works if you have bricks and mortar. If
Right.
all your classrooms are full, then you either got to put more kids in the classrooms, or you got to have more classrooms. And Acton has done it with, a number of their schools have got the standalone trailers, for want of the portable classrooms, for want of another word. But I mean, they've been there for years and years and years over there.
That's not pretty permanent, right? Can be, yeah.
So, but you don't see any need in the next 3 or 4 years for bricks and
Well, I'm
mortar?
not going to say that, because it's pretty hard to predict what's going to happen with all the land that's become available in town. If you have 300 more residences in this town, two children per resident, that could be 600 students.
Well, we've got
That could be an issue.
23 going in down by the train station,
Yeah.
right? We've got, 4 of them going on Harwood Ave right now, and they're not little tiny places. They're
But it's also
tremendous.
dependent on how many people stay here once their kids get out of schools. And if they
Depends on the
stay here, then
And the best science-
you don't
The
know.
best science we have going for us right now are some of the studies been done, the housing production plan is an example, things that MAPC has done for us, and it shows the town aging along with the rest of the population of the state and the country at large. So there's going to be perturbations, there's no doubt about it. But over the long haul, the forecast, that's all they are, for as good as you want to put money on them, is a downward trend of youngsters and an increasing trend of us.
Yeah, I think
But the people buying 4-bedroom McMansions aren't the 55-plus.
But that's not all the home sales in town either. There are people,
Right.
But they're the only ones with
Houses
the
are
money
getting
to build.
And somewhat anecdotal, you can see that those 4-bedroom homes don't have, in some cases, no children at all, anecdotally speaking.
Yeah, well, that's going to be my next question.
On a
So-
short section of Harwood Ave, there were 6 of them that weren't there 2 years ago.
Okay.
So they're showing up.
Okay, it's getting late. To me, the big question is, so the capital, I know we've done this before, and you go through and you take your best guess, but for the budget purpose, what is the next step? How do we do this? What is the process to set priorities in terms of whether we don't increase the levy, whether, yes, we do the normal, and here, depending on what the school does, obviously what's going to happen there, if there is some extra money, we have a list of all these town departments asking for more people. Where do those priorities come from? How do we do
I think
this?
the selectmen should make, you guys establish your own, priorities within them. The parameters are pretty well set here, it's wonderfully laid out. You guys just gotta make some choices, and then we're gonna see whether we agree with it. And you guys do.
And that's what we did last year in particular, that the month of January was prioritizing by the selectmen, and those, we'll probably do that at both of our regular meetings on the 11th and the 25th, to which you're all invited, and we'll regroup. When's our next joint meeting? Is it next month or is it February?
Whatever that is.
Let me look at the-
February is usually when we do it.
February.
But if you guys are gonna be doing that,
But we'd be,
let us know.
but we would
March
be, we typically have the larger departments in to talk with us in
Yeah.
greater detail about their.
That's when it's scheduled now. I was saying we couldn't change that, make it sooner.
March 8th?
Probably
For the joint meeting.
early February, maybe.
Yeah, we should do it in February.
All right, there's a February 9th meeting, we can maybe do that instead, or at least for us, and then if we do it at their meeting at the Board of Selectmen meeting next time, we can do that. Could you just, as you have these budget prioritization discussions at the Board of Selectmen meetings, just make sure that we get a copy of those agendas so we know that we don't do or not have to be posted for that, but just so we know, so we can go and participate if we want to.
So part of that process is, I'm supposed to schedule a working group to go over the capital projects, the projects that we prioritize. And 2 years ago, we established a prioritization of how to, where to put those projects. You do life safety, code compliance, building envelope, HVAC, that kind of stuff. I think we came up with 7 different categories. So Jim Carr asked me to reconvene that group, which I sent out an email maybe a week ago or so, and tried to set something up for this week, and everyone was just too busy, and he said, let's do it after the beginning of the year. So I still have to go through and put the different projects in those different buckets, and I'll send that out to everybody, and then anyone else that wants to participate. I know, Paul, you were in the process 2 years ago. Yeah. And Fred was, so, I'll send it out to Jim and everyone that was in it the last time, and then let
Get us
Jim
put
and
together,
and, the group decide who wants to participate.
Yeah, that'd be great.
You okay?
If I may, and it gets back to whether or not we go to the levy, if we do stay under that. Certainly this evening's discussion was budget. Whether to go to the levy or not is a tax issue. As we all know, tax issues can certainly become heated. I'm going to ask that you folks consider, if you think it's appropriate and worth pursuing, is that the Fincom looks at a process and how to approach that, and maybe recommendations. Because you could just say, well, X hundred thousands of dollars we won't raise to the levy, and we salami slice everything. Not suggesting that. Or we go in and ask each, particular department, this is what we're going to be looking at, and you got to come up with something that is less than you've already proposed. And I think if you folks as the Fincom, just by virtue of the title of the committee, it may be more useful if it comes out from you folks and then presented to the community at large. And I'm asking you a lot, and I understand that, because usually if you come up with the idea, you're obligated to work the idea. So I'm certainly willing to work with you all on that. But I would think it's better coming from the Fincom as to how to approach that.
I'm not sure I know what you mean, as far as, I don't think we can help you establish what your priorities are.
No, it's not a priority. so much is an approach. We could just say, based on, we do some math and come up with, some formulation on how to determine what might be a good number to go under the levy. Whether you say it's a dollar figure, whether it's a percentage, so instead of 2.5, it's 2.4%, just as an example. Rather than all the way to the levy limit, just using the level staffing, the numbers that were presented this evening, albeit there are many permutations to that, but the $216,000 or so, we identified that as being, I hate to use the word excess, but maybe available. It's $216,000. And again, I'm not advocating any particular number or method. These are just possibilities, and that's why I'm asking that maybe the Fincom is best suited to come up with that approach.
I think at root that's a philosophical issue, whether or not that's a priority or collectively.
Philosophy,
I don't think there's a math formula that's going to tell you whether or not you should tax an accident or not,
No, but you can weight some factors, and the math works. Now, we may disagree with the number, but it's at least supportable.
Something to ponder.
Certainly ponder, but
It's not a solution for this evening.
I'd much rather switch seats and sit in the audience and watch the elected selectmen and the elected school committee members talk about that one rather than the
I've already raised it.
Yeah, well, good, I'm glad you did.
Twice. So it's news this evening as far as in the selectmen and the audience that watches the selectmen. It's new this evening for you all, unless you watch the selectmen meetings, which...
I watched it. I did.
Occasionally I do. When I have nothing to do.
I've been watching
And he did
last
say it.
night's meeting.
I saw him.
No, I haven't. Wrap it up.
Okay, yeah, and to me, the first discussion would be like, how much do you have to come under to make it at all significant to a person? We go through all this and then somebody gets $10 off their tax bill and,
Works for me.
That's an
That's 10 in the other direction.
Because we won't come up with any number
Right.
that falls into that significant category per residential taxpayer.
Right.
I agree with you 100%.
Okay,
But it's in the direction that's amenable to the individual taxpayer in town. That's the important piece of this. We are not going to solve 10, 15, 20%. We're not going to reverse tax
Right.
increases. The taxes will continue to increase. This is just a methodology to slow the increase. And ultimately, folks at town meeting get to make the decision too. They're going to
Right.
vote, and I'm going to toss this out, and again, it's just brainstorming on the fly,
Right.
so things, not that I haven't thought about it before, because I have.
right,
And one is, maybe you go with two budgets at town meeting. One is fully levy, and the other is something less than full levy. And you say, this is what doesn't happen in less than the levy. And I know what you think.
You're asking for an opinion, I'll just tell you an educated opinion. We went down that road once before, it was called chaos. And we did it involuntarily, and people were most angry that they weren't being presented with a proposal.
Well, no, I'm offering, in this particular example, two proposals.
We go to town meeting with a proposal.
Paul, let's do it and have him present them.
And I'll be out of town that week.
I have no problem with no, but when I don't ask the question, it's no already.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
you're right.
No, we can chat about it.
I'll put it on, we'll have some more discussion about it.
Other towns do it. I mean, it's not like, it's not like a gimmick or, it doesn't have to be. It's a, it's a place that towns have ended up at. And that we can have this conversation is a good sign to mirror what, parrot what.
There's no doubt town meeting would be entertaining and interesting that evening. There's no doubt.
I prefer the uninteresting town meetings myself.
It would be 40 minutes, is right. But it gives the folks an opportunity.
Yeah, I was going to say, but, I mean, a different way of maybe talking about that would be is right now we're funding things based on the projections that we have available for it. So one could step back and say, is the right number $1.1 million for this account or $1 million? It's 1.1 because the budget said we could put 1.1 into it versus looking at what would be the right amount to put into that item. And the easy part for me is to say those other accounts that we're stocking away stuff into. So I know some of them we just add the extra money into them, not arbitrarily, but I know. Or you say, I want to cap it at $1 million. So if there's 1.1 available for it, I'm not going to put 1.1. I'm going to reuse that to offset some other account there, which may lead to the flexibility to reduce in the overall levy. I don't know. Just maybe a slightly different way of doing it, which puts it more of a financial analysis perspective rather than the selectmen's priority piece there, which says
these are our priority items we want funded, despite what's available in the budget.
Kind of like,
And then rework the
just
budget
to-
to meet those funding priorities. I mean,
Right,
that's
one of my
like-
issues,
it's
this is
the
sounding like
yin-yang of-
adding hours for the fire station, the police department, because they can do it within their own budget, as opposed to looking at the whole town and seeing, is that really our
But I
priority
think
across all the
that's the
town?
selectmen's prioritization process.
Right? Sorry, but,
On that note,
On that note.
I make a motion.
no, we have to vote on minutes first, and then you can make a motion.
Let's try. I was ready.
You can make a motion to
second it.
accept the minutes from
You should've.
December 1st if you'd like.
I'll make that motion. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay, no.
Okay, now,
Now I make the motion. Second.
all right. All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.